There are women who, when they leave, do not just walk away from a house, they walk away from an old definition of who they once were. She was once the perfect daughter-in-law of a prestigious New York family, until she was humiliated before hundreds of eyes for a straightforward reason, daring to be different. But on the night she left, no one knew that the woman they despised was the very one who had once saved that family from falling apart. This is not a story about revenge but rebirth, a journey where compassion and self-respect transform a wounded soul into a symbol of strength. This is the story of Michelle Anna, the woman who stepped out of the shadows into the light of her own making. The first sound of that evening was the clinking of crystal glasses. A soft ting echoed through the shimmering air of the handy mansion in the Hamptons, where tonight everyone had gathered to celebrate the engagement of Victoria Handy, the family's beloved daughter, to James Wellington, heir to one of the most distinguished dynasties in America. Light from dozens of crystal chandeliers danced across the marble walls like waves of the sea. The room was filled with the hum of soft jazz, the scent of Chanel perfume, and the rhythmic click of high heels on polished stone. It was a scene out of a movie, so beautiful it almost made one forget that within all this splendor, a woman was about to be pushed into the cruelest moment of her life. Michelle Anna Handy appeared at the grand staircase, holding a silver tray of champagne flutes. She wore a simple black Valentino dress, a gift from Todd for their 3rd wedding anniversary. It was the dress that once made her feel confident, elegant, and able to blend into a room full of elite women without feeling misplaced. But tonight, under the glow of the chandeliers, she wasn't sure anymore. From a distance, the wealthy guests eyed her with mild curiosity. Some whispered, "Who is that? She's lovely. Must be the Handy's new staff." Michelle heard them but smiled anyway. She had learned how to smile through every cut and every sting. It was the only way she knew to survive in this family. Todd, her husband, stood near the stage beside his mother, Margaret Handy, the woman whose pearl necklace and glass-cutting smile were as much a family emblem as their coat of arms. To society, Margaret was elegance incarnate. To Michelle, she was the deepest wound to her pride. Michelle had personally planned the entire evening, from the cascading white roses hanging from the ceiling to the soft violin quartet filling the air. Every detail bore her quiet grace. Yet as the night unfolded, she found herself invisible. No one mentioned her name in the speeches. No one wondered why she was the one serving drinks. In the corner, Mrs. Wellington, the groom's refined, silver-haired mother, leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Charles, who's that woman serving? She's so poised." Her voice was soft but just loud enough for Margaret to hear. Margaret looked up, a faint smile curving her lips, her tone sharp and glacial. "Oh, her? Just our house manager. We like to be hands-on in this family sometimes. Our staff get too involved." The words fell like a blade. The music played on, but to Michelle, everything blurred. Her blood seemed to drain from her face. Every gaze in the room turned toward her, curious, pitying, dissecting. From the main table, Todd gave a light laugh. Not to reassure her, but to join in. "Mother's right," he said aloud, his voice mingling with the guests' laughter. "She loves playing hostess. It's her thing, really. Michelle can't help but serve others. It's a habit." The laughter spread, soft, elegant, merciless. Michelle stood still. The tray in her hands trembled. The golden bubbles shimmered, and her knuckles turned white as she gripped the silver edge. She heard echoes of countless similar evenings being corrected, dismissed, and reminded to be proper. She once believed that love and patience could make them see her for who she truly was. But tonight, beneath the glittering chandeliers, Michelle realized they never had. A sharp clink. The tray slipped from her hands, crashing onto the marble floor. Glass shattered. Champagne spilled, glinting like falling stars. The room froze. Someone gasped. Someone turned away. Victoria, her sister-in-law, stood up in alarm. "Todd, what are you saying?" "She's your wife." Todd squinted, his tone dripping disdain. "Wife or maid, what's the difference? She only knows how to serve. Don't make a scene." A chill ran down Michelle's spine. And in that moment, she saw everything clearly, not the lights, not the faces, but the truth. She had lost herself in this house long ago. Margaret stepped closer, her voice cold, sharp as a silver knife. "Clean this up, Michelle. And next time, if you want to feel important, remember you're still staff here." Michelle knelt, trembling fingers gathering shards of glass. One piece sliced her finger. A bright bead of blood bloomed against the white floor. Todd leaned in, still smiling. "Careful, darling. The floor was just polished." That was the sound of something breaking, not glass this time, but her heart. Michelle rose slowly. Every eye in the room was on her, the woman with a bleeding hand, blazing eyes, and steady breath. She set the tray on the table, removed her gloves, and slipped the ring off her left hand. Light from the chandelier caught the diamond, a glint like a tear. She placed it in front of Todd. Her voice was calm, quiet, but it carried through the room like a clear note. "Here I am. Yours no more." Todd froze. Margaret's mouth fell open, as if the world had suddenly tilted. Michelle turned, walking through the silence. Her heels struck the marble sharp, deliberate, like the heartbeat of freedom. No one stopped her. Only the trembling notes of an unfinished jazz tune followed her out. Outside, the Hampton sky glowed with a cold moonlight. Michelle stepped into the night, her shoulders straight, her eyes steady. No one chased her, no apologies, no touch. Only wind and the lingering scent of roses from the garden. She walked down the stone path, where the golden streetlights stretched like forgotten memories. With each step, she heard the voices in her mind. Margaret's "Know Your Place," Todd's "It was just a joke," and her own "How often will I let them step over me?" A small, quiet smile curved her lips, the first real one in months. Tonight, she was no longer the perfect wife, Mrs. Handy. She was simply Michelle Anna, the woman who chose herself over submission. At the gate, her phone buzzed. "Todd." She looked at the screen. For a moment, her heart still tightened, reflex, not love. Then she pressed end. No more words. Clouds drifted across the moon. She pulled her shawl close and stopped before the open field, gazing back at the glowing mansion. From afar, it still gleamed with laughter and light. She knew, within minutes, they would rewrite the story. That she was too sensitive, that she couldn't handle pressure, that she was losing control. She exhaled a soft farewell. Everything she once tried to hold, dignity, family, love, shattered like glass at her feet. Michelle reached into her bag, pulling out a smaller phone, plain, unconnected to the Handy name. She typed one message. "It's time." The car's waiting out back. A yellow cab pulled up in the distance. She walked toward it. The driver, a middle-aged Cuban man, turned and asked, "Where to, lady?" Michelle smiled. "Manhattan." The car rolled forward. The lights of the Handy estate faded into the distance, a world dissolving behind her. She saw Todd rush onto the balcony in the rearview mirror, shouting something, but the wind carried it away. Michelle looked ahead. The trees, the road, the glimmer of ocean under moonlight, and the soft jazz from the driver's radio. She placed a hand over her heart, and for the first time in a long while, it beat not out of fear, but because she was alive. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "Tomorrow, they'll say you ran away, but you know you're just coming home to yourself." The taxi sped out of the Hamptons toward the highway, where the city lights of New York began to rise on the horizon. That night, Michelle Anna Handy, the woman once called staff, left behind her ring and past and stepped into a new chapter of her story. On Interstate 495, the yellow taxi sped through the night like a streak of light. Inside, Michelle leaned her head against the window, watching the highway lamps fade one by one behind her. They flickered like fragments of memory, mornings spent making Todd's breakfast, the times she mended his shirts, the apologies he never gave. The driver turned on the radio. A soft, nostalgic tune rose, Frank Sinatra's "Fly Me to the Moon." Michelle closed her eyes. The lyrics felt like echoes from another world, the world of beautiful illusions she once believed in. By the time the taxi reached Manhattan, it was close to midnight. The city was still awake, towers glittering, streets humming, life rushing forward like a grand, restless stage. But amid all that brilliance, Michelle wanted only silence. The cab stopped in front of the high-rise on 72nd Street, where she and Todd had lived for 5 years. The handy penthouse, overlooking Central Park, the same one Margaret so proudly called the home of Todd and his perfect wife. Michelle paid the driver, drew a deep breath, and stepped inside. The doorman greeted her with a nod, hesitated briefly at the sight of her swollen eyes and the wine-stained dress, but kept his composure. She said softly, "I'm just here to collect a few things. Then I'm gone. If anyone asks, I was never here." He nodded. The elevator doors closed, reflecting her face in the steel mirror, still beautiful, but utterly changed. Under the harsh white light, she noticed the cut on her hand was still bleeding. She wrapped it with a tissue. It hurt, but it was a pain that felt real, the only truth in a night full of lies. When she entered the apartment, the familiar scent of oak, leather, and cognac filled the air. Everything remained the same: the white sofa, the framed wedding photo on the table, the piano she once played every morning. She touched the keys lightly. A note escaped, thin, hollow, lost. The door opened behind her. Todd entered, tie loose, reeking of alcohol, eyes burning with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're back. God. Michelle, do you even know what you did tonight?" His voice heavy as lead. She didn't turn. "Yes. I ended a farce that went on too long." Todd threw his jacket onto the couch. "A farce? You humiliated my mother in front of everyone." She was joking. Why overreact? Michelle turned, her eyes calm but deep. "Todd, do you really think public humiliation is a joke? You're too sensitive." She was only, "Enough, Todd." She cut him off. "Your mother doesn't just despise me. She despises you too. You're too afraid to see it." He fell silent, shoulders trembling slightly. After a pause, he said quietly, "I'm sorry if she hurt you. I'll talk to her. But please don't make a scene. I have to protect my reputation with the Wellingtons, the press, our partners." Michelle gave a small, humorless laugh. "Todd, you've just listed why this marriage can't go on." She walked to the table and picked up her wedding ring from the morning newspaper. The diamond still shone, but its light was cold now. "You know, Todd, this ring used to mean love. Now it's just another lifeless ornament like everything else in this house." Todd stepped closer, grasping her hand. "I don't want to lose you, Michelle. You're the one who keeps everything together." She looked down at his hand, clutching hers, once a comfort, now a weight. "You're not losing me, Todd. You never had me. You had a name, a woman to stand beside you so you could look complete." He tightened his grip. "I love you." She met his eyes, voice low but unwavering. "No. You love the way I make you look. You love the image, not the woman." Silence, only the clock ticking, tick, tick, counting down the end. Michelle gently pulled her hand free. "I'm leaving. Don't call. Please don't come after me. And your mother." She paused. She can keep lying, but this time no one will believe her. She turned and walked out, leaving Todd alone in the cold white room, surrounded by furniture that seemed to judge him. The sound was subtle, but final when the door clicked shut behind her. Michelle didn't go to a hotel. She walked along Park Avenue, the night air carrying the damp scent of leaves and distant traffic. The city kept living, unaware that one woman had just lost everything and found herself simultaneously. A young waitress greeted her warmly at a 24-hour cafe on 59th Street. "Latte, miss." Michelle nodded. As the steaming cup was placed before her, she watched the swirling vapor rise like the years circling the same man, the same family, the same suffocating silence. She pulled out a small folded note from her purse, her to-do list. In neat black ink, the first lines read, "Step 1, leave. Step 2, stay silent until you're truly free." She smiled faintly. The ring was gone, but its imprint remained a pale circle on her skin, like the scar of something once called love. Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. "I heard you left the handy home. If you need a place, I have a spare apartment in Midtown. Catherine Morrison." Michelle read the text, warmth blooming quietly in her chest. Catherine, an old friend and editor at New York People, once admired her for her charity projects years ago. She typed back, "Thank you. I'll come in the morning. Outside, rain began to fall. Droplets traced paths down the cafe window, soft as a heartbeat. She sipped her coffee. The bitterness spread real, unmasked. By dawn, Michelle returned to the penthouse one last time to collect a few belongings. The apartment was silent. Todd lay passed out on the sofa, an empty bottle shattered nearby. She crept, like a shadow. She didn't touch him, only paused by the table where the ring still rested, glinting under the dim hallway light. She bent down and placed a small note beside it. You had everything but couldn't keep a heart. Then she left, carrying a single suitcase, a few clothes, a notebook, and an old photograph of herself laughing in the sundae. The elevator doors closed, her reflection shrinking in the mirror. The soft, wistful tune of Someone Like You drifted from the lobby. Michelle didn't see those who hadn't yet learned the strength of silence from the lobby radio. When she stepped out into the lobby, the doorman bowed slightly. Have a peaceful night, Miss Michelle. She nodded. Thank you. I will for the first time in years. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened, reflecting the city lights like a galaxy beneath her feet. She looked down at her bare hand where the ring once lay. Now there was only warm skin, steady breath, and the lightness of freedom. Michelle inhaled deeply, eyes lifting toward the faint glow of dawn rising beyond the skyline. A new chapter was beginning, quiet, unpromised, but real. And in that moment, she knew, the silent ring, once a symbol of bondage, the thing that made her forget herself, had become a complete stop, the end of an old life, and the beginning of a woman reclaiming her destiny. Morning in New York always began with familiar sounds: car horns, the rustle of newspapers, the hiss of an espresso machine on the corner. But that morning felt strangely quiet to Michelle. Perhaps because, for the first time in years, she woke without waiting for anyone's call, preparing breakfast, or planning someone else's day. She was staying in Catherine Morrison's small apartment, her old friend, the editor of New York People. The place had just 2 rooms, low ceilings, and sunlight filtering through thin white curtains. Yet Michelle felt more at peace there than ever in any penthouse. On the table lay a note in Catherine's handwriting, keys on the counter, milk in the fridge, and maybe write everything down before deciding what's next. See, Michelle smiled. Beside it sat a half-empty cup of coffee, the quiet understanding only a true friend leaves behind. She sat down, opened her notebook, and wrote the first line. Day 1. I've left them. Not because I hate them, but because I want to live. Her pen paused mid-air. A sudden thought struck her. There were still a few things at the penthouse she hadn't taken. Not jewelry, not clothes, but a wooden box in the cabinet at the end of the hallway where she once kept old work documents. She had meant to destroy them, but never did. Now, her instinct whispered, go back. That afternoon, Michelle returned to the building on 72nd Street. The doorman nodded. Would you like me to inform Mr. Handy you're here? No need, she said calmly. I'm only collecting what's mine. The elevator carried her up. The apartment was still and airless. Todd was either asleep or gone. She walked past the living room where the wedding photos still hung her smiling beside Todd, eyes bright with trust. Looking at them now, she felt like watching a stranger. Down the hall, the last door stood ajar, her old study. Warm light spilled through the curtains. She knelt, opening the bottom drawer, and found the small wooden box with a brass lock untouched, a thin layer of dust resting on top. Michelle placed it on the desk and stared at it for a while. It was dark oak, the lock slightly tarnished, a gift from her father before he passed. Inside were papers she had kept from her time as a financial advisor, before marriage, before the name Handy appeared on her business cards. She turned the key, a soft click, and the lid lifted. Inside lay envelopes, transaction slips, contracts, and handwritten letters. As she sifted through them, one name appeared repeatedly: Handy Corporation. Her brow furrowed. Numbers, notes, investment certificates, all from the same year. Her first as Todd's wife. She remembered. That was when Todd's company had been in crisis, stocks plummeting, layoffs piling up. She had quietly used her savings of over $500,000 to keep them afloat. She never told anyone. Margaret once said, "A good wife stays behind the curtain. She doesn't need credit." Michelle's hands trembled. She pulled out a letter, Margaret's handwriting. "Michelle, without your transfer, this family would have lost everything. But it's best to stay silent. Todd doesn't need to know. We'll repay you with respect." Michelle let out a soft, bitter laugh. Respect. The most beautiful, and most hollow, word in the handy vocabulary. She kept turning the papers. At the bottom was an old newspaper, her 2015 Forbes Women interview. Michelle Anna, the woman bringing compassion into finance. Her photo showed her smiling among children from the Future Light project. Underneath, someone had scrawled in red ink, "Don't let anyone know she was once more famous than Todd." Michelle fell silent. Everything made sense now. They never loved her. They feared her brightness, and to protect their fragile pride, they chose to dim her light. She closed the box, a tear landing on the wood, spreading into a small circle. Not from pain, but from mourning the version of herself who once believed love and silence were enough. She tore a scrap of paper and wrote a few lines, placing it inside the box. "You once said I owed this family gratitude, but perhaps it is this family that owes me the truth." Michelle locked the box and left it on the desk, not to keep, but as a silent reminder for those who would soon face what they'd tried to bury. As she stepped into the hallway, a voice came from behind. Todd. He stood in the bedroom doorway, shirt half open, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You're still here?" His voice rough. "Just getting my things," she said. "Don't worry, I'm not taking anything that's yours." Todd's gaze shifted to the box. "What's that?" "Memories," she replied evenly. "Ones you and your mother probably forgot." She walked past him. Todd reached out, gripping her shoulder. I don't want it to end like this." She paused, not turning. "It's not the end, Todd. It's everything finally returning to where it belongs." Then she left. The door closed behind her softly, but with the weight of a final breath. Outside, sunlight spilled across 72nd Street, painting gold lines on the pavement. Michelle stopped, looking up at the clear blue sky, her chest wide open for the first time in years. Across the street, a child laughed, chasing a ball, pure, unguarded joy. The sound reminded her of the charity days she once loved, when happiness wasn't performance but truth. She realized she hadn't laughed freely like that in years, only smiled just enough to keep suspicion away. Her phone buzzed. A message from Catherine. "I spoke with the Future Light Foundation. They're looking for an advisor. I think your name still carries weight." Michelle looked at the screen, a gentle, proud smile rising. "Tell them Michelle Anna is still here." She slipped her phone into her pocket and waved for a taxi. "Midtown, please. Right away, lady." As the car pulled away, she glanced back again at the building. In her mind, the image of that wooden box lingered, resting quietly in the room at the end of the hall, a silent witness waiting for truth to resurface. That afternoon, Margaret entered her former daughter-in-law's room in the penthouse above. She meant to tidy up, to throw things away. Then she saw the box. Her hand hesitated. She opened it and froze at the note inside. "This family owes me the truth." Her fingers dug into the wood until her nails left marks. She wanted to throw it away but couldn't. Something in those words made her afraid. Not of Michelle, but of herself. She looked around the velvet chair, the tidy shelves, the elegant details Michelle had once chosen. Everything was immaculate, but lifeless, as if the woman who'd lived there had never truly belonged. Margaret sat down and opened the box fully. The bank slips, the contracts, the letter in her handwriting all staring back at her. Her face paled, her breath caught. For the first time, she saw clearly the woman she'd dismissed wasn't a gold digger. She was the one who had saved them. Margaret closed the lid, whispering under her breath, "Michelle, what have you done to me?" But the room was silent. Only the clock ticked steadily, counting down to the day truth would no longer stay hidden. Across the city, Michelle sat by the window of her small midtown apartment. Outside, the sun was setting, painting gold across the skyline. She picked up her notebook and wrote, "Day 2. I saw myself in the mirror again, and I am no longer afraid." She closed the book, leaned her head against the glass, and murmured, "Thank you, little box. Thank you for reminding me that I was strong and still can be." The final image is of New York glowing under twilight, streets alive with motion, and inside a quiet room, Michelle Anna sits with peaceful eyes, the gaze of a woman who has finally touched freedom after years of silence. The wooden box remains somewhere else, guarding its truth, a silent warning to those who believe lies can last forever. News of the missing wife of the Handy family spread faster than Margaret Handy could have imagined. Just 3 days after the engagement party in the Hamptons, every major paper in New York carried the same kind of headline. Mrs. Handy disappears during engagement celebration. The story behind the smile of the elite. Who is Michelle Anna, the woman who walked away from the spotlight? Margaret read each headline, her face pale. Every word cut through her pride like a blade. She had always been the one who controlled the news, but this time the news controlled her. In the grand living room of the Handy penthouse, newspapers were strewn across the marble table. Todd paced back and forth, hair disheveled, eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. "Mother, I told you don't speak to the press now. The more we talk, the more they smell blood." Margaret slammed her hand down on the table. "We must control the story, Todd. Do you have any idea what they're saying? They claim we humiliated her in public." Todd turned away, sighing quietly. "Because that's what happened, Mother." Margaret froze, eyes sharp as glass. "What did you just say?" "I said." Todd met her gaze, voice heavy, "that I was part of it. I stood there when she needed me to speak and said nothing." Margaret's grip tightened on the armrest. "Do you know what the Wellingtons must be thinking? If you admit this, we lose everything. Victoria's engagement will be ruined." Todd looked at her for a long time. "Maybe that's what needs to happen." Margaret shot up, voice trembling with fury. "No, no one destroys what I've built." Her voice echoed through the vast, cold room, like the cry of a steel bird trapped too long inside a gilded cage. That afternoon, Margaret picked up the phone and called Catherine Morrison, her old friend, now editor of New York People. Her tone was syrup smooth, each word carefully measured. "Catherine, I heard you're running a story on Michelle. I just wanted to say, poor thing. She hasn't been, well, lately." Catherine paused for a moment before answering. "I know, Margaret. I just got a message from her. She's doing very well." The phone slipped from Margaret's fingers. She contacted you?" "Yes. And she told me one thing, that she won't stay silent this time." Before Margaret could respond, the line went dead. And in that moment, she understood. She was no longer in control. Across town, Michelle sat in a small cafe near Central Park, sunlight spilling through the windows, the smell of fresh pastries mingling with the morning air. She wore a white shirt, her hair neatly tied up, and her face was calm and radiant. Catherine sat opposite her, studying her quietly before speaking. "You're not going to make a statement?" Michelle smiled faintly, sipping her coffee. "I've been silent too long, Kathy. But this time, I don't need to shout. I need to live, and the truth will speak for itself." Catherine smiled back, eyes soft with admiration. "The press is starving for a story. They'll dig into everything, Michelle. Then let them. They'll find what they're meant to find." Catherine exhaled, shaking her head. "You've changed." "No, Kathy," Michelle said gently. "I've simply come back to who I was." Light from the window caught her eyes, deep, serene, and unafraid. No more tears, no more tremors. Just quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to roar to be felt. At the corner of the cafe, a young journalist pretended to read his paper while stealing glances at them. Michelle noticed, but she didn't look away. When the camera flash flickered, she smiled, the first genuine smile in days. By the next morning, the photo was everywhere online. Michelle Anna calm in New York after leaving the Handy estate. No statement, no defense. Just one picture, and the city began to side with her. The Handy family held a small press conference at the Plaza Hotel 4 days later. Margaret insisted it was necessary to clear misunderstandings. Todd disagreed, but his resistance had grown weak. Reporters crowded the hall, flashes blinding. Margaret stepped up to the podium, her smile strained. "Recent misinterpretations deeply sadden our family. My daughter-in-law, Michelle, is going through a difficult time. She needs rest to regain balance. We ask that you respect her privacy." The words rolled smoothly, rehearsed like a performance. But then, a voice rose from the crowd. "Mrs. Handy, there are claims that you and your son publicly humiliated Michelle during the party. Do you deny it?" The air froze. Margaret faltered. Flashbulbs exploded. She took a breath and forced a smile. "Rumors are always exaggerated. Michelle knows we care for her deeply." Todd lowered his gaze, hands clenched. He couldn't take it anymore. "Mother, stop," he muttered. "Todd," Margaret hissed. He stood, turning toward the cameras. "I won't lie anymore. My mother insulted her in front of everyone, and I stood by and did nothing. If anyone's to blame, it's me." The room erupted. Questions, shouts, flashes, chaos. Margaret froze, face drained of color. Within hours, the story spread. The next morning's New York Times headline read, "Todd Handy admits to publicly humiliating his wife. Michelle Anna, a new symbol of women who walk away." At that moment, Michelle was walking through Central Park. Leaves carpeted the path in gold. She held her phone, reading the headlines. No satisfaction, no bitterness, only relief. The world had finally seen what she'd known, that truth needs time, not noise. She sat on a bench, watching the lake shimmer beneath the sky. A breeze brushed a strand of hair across her face. A young boy cycled past, stopped, and asked, "Are you okay, miss?" Michelle laughed softly. "Better than ever, kid." He grinned and rode off, his laughter echoing behind him. Michelle watched him go, her eyes distant but warm. She knew her life was shifting into a new chapter of action, rebirth, and light. Somewhere in the steel towers of Manhattan, Margaret Handy was still fighting to salvage her dignity. But Michelle understood something Margaret never would, that true dignity can't be bought, and it can't be built on lies. Early mornings in New York carried their scent: toasted bread, coffee, and the faint tang of car exhaust mixed with the damp wind from the Hudson River. That morning, Michelle sat by the window of Catherine Morrison's small midtown apartment, watching the stream of people below. They walked like no one in the city ever had time to disappear, but she had, at least from her old world. The name Michelle Handy now existed only as a fading shadow. The press had stopped chasing her. Public attention had shifted to some new scandal. In that silence, Michelle finally felt alive. Catherine entered, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You should see this," she said, placing a copy of New York People on the table. On the cover was a candid photo of Michelle at a cafe near Central Park, the one taken a few days earlier. The headline read, "The woman who walked away, Michelle Anna, a symbol of freedom." Michelle laughed softly. "They're calling me a symbol. I was drinking coffee." Catherine shrugged. "In this city, if you choose silence, people will talk for you." Michelle looked down at her cup, her voice quiet. "Maybe for the first time, I don't have to explain anything anymore." Catherine sat beside her, speaking gently. "I've got news. The Future Light Foundation is looking for a new program director. I remember you started your first branch in Seattle." Michelle's eyes lifted, a glimmer of surprise. "They still remember me?" "Of course. You were the one who made the project real. All you need to do is email. I'll handle the rest." Michelle fell silent. It had been years since she'd thought of those days when work was about purpose, not appearances. A soft breeze drifted through the window, brushing her hair. She whispered, almost to herself, "All right, I'll try. But this time, not to prove anything, just to be me." Catherine smiled, raising her cup. "Then here's to you, Michelle Anna, the woman who disappeared only to return stronger." Their cups clinked lightly, like a ringing bell opening a new chapter. That afternoon, Michelle went to Central Park. The autumn sky was clear, golden leaves carpeting the path. She sat on her usual wooden bench, opened her laptop, and began to type an email to the Future Light Foundation. "Dear Board of Directors, I am Michelle Anna. I collaborated with your organization in 2015. After a long hiatus, I hope to return as an advisor. Sincerely, Michelle Anna." She reread it, her hand trembling slightly. The name Michelle Anna without Handy. Just a name, yet it carried the weight of freedom. As she pressed send, the afternoon light caught her bare hand, no ring, mark, or chain. A group of children ran past, laughing, chasing one another. A brown-haired girl turned and smiled at her. Michelle smiled back. It had been so long since she'd felt that kind of lightness. That evening, Catherine came home carrying an envelope. "You've got mail." Michelle opened it. Inside was a letter from the Future Light Foundation. "We're thrilled to hear from you. The project needs the touch of its founder. We look forward to seeing you on Monday morning. Mark Reynolds, Executive Director." Michelle read it twice. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of quiet joy. It was the feeling of having a reason to wake up again. On Monday, the Future Light Foundation's office sat on the 18th floor of an old building on Broadway. Michelle walked in, a little nervous, her eyes steady. She wore a white blouse and black trousers and had no jewelry, only a silver bracelet, her late father's gift. Mark Reynolds, a silver-haired man with kind eyes, greeted her with a warm smile. "Michelle Anna, it's good to hear that name again." "Thank you, Mark. I thought I'd left this world behind for good. Some people are meant to come back, you know." They shook hands. The interview was brief, no hard questions, no doubts. Mark already knew who she was and what she'd done. As she was leaving, he said, "We're naming the new project The Second Light." "The Second Light?" she asked. "Yes, because everyone deserves a second chance." Michelle stepped into the hallway, her heart light. She looked down at Broadway, glowing with life, the noise, the sunlight, the city's pulse. For the first time in years, she felt part of it again. Catherine brought her to a small charity gala at the Ritz-Carlton that night. It wasn't the kind of glittering affair the Handys threw, but a gathering of people who did the real work. Michelle entered hesitantly, afraid of curious stares or familiar faces. Then a voice called out, "You're Michelle Anna, right? I read the article about you. Thank you for inspiring so many women." Michelle turned. A middle-aged black woman took her hand, eyes warm with admiration. "I was once in your shoes. I left a bad marriage too. Your story gave me the courage to start over." Michelle's voice caught in her throat. "Thank you. I'm just someone who survived." "No," the woman said gently, smiling. "You're someone who helps others survive." The woman walked away, leaving Michelle standing still, heart full. She understood then sometimes. Simply living your truth is enough to help someone else find theirs. Later that night, when the gala ended, Michelle stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city's sea of lights. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. It was James Wellington. He looked at her, eyes filled with surprise and relief. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I. I wanted to apologize for Victoria and my family. We believed the wrong story." Michelle nodded, her tone calm. "It's all right, James. I've learned how to forgive, starting with myself." They stood side by side, looking over the glowing skyline. James spoke quietly. "You're coming back, aren't you? I heard you're leading the Second Light Foundation." Michelle smiled. "Maybe. A new chapter, one that belongs only to me." He studied her, his expression thoughtful. "The world needs more people like you." She turned to him, her voice gentle yet steady. "Maybe the world needs more people willing to keep walking even when they're afraid." The wind lifted her hair. Under the city lights, Michelle Anna stood tall, no longer the woman humiliated at a party, but the woman who had rewritten her own fate. Across the room, Catherine watched her and murmured to a friend, "She's not the woman who disappeared anymore. She's the woman who returned." Back at her midtown apartment, Michelle opened the window that night, breathing in the city air. The sound of distant traffic and the warm glow on the walls all felt alive again. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Day 10. I've returned. Not to prove anything, to live. And this time, I won't disappear." She closed the notebook and turned off the light. City beams filtered through the curtains, tracing a soft line across her face, serene, steady, quietly luminous. Somewhere in the night, a jazz melody floated through the air, the victory song of a woman who had finally found herself again. Saturday afternoon, rain drizzled over New York. Along the road to the Meridian Country Club, the gathering place of the city's elite, the maple trees were soaked, their yellow leaves carpeting the wet pavement like a fading painting. Michelle stepped out of the building after a meeting with the donors of the Future Light Foundation. She had just been officially appointed project director of the Second Light. Everything felt like a new beginning, not loud or grand, but quietly whole. She opened her umbrella and walked toward the parking lot. Her heels struck the wet ground in steady rhythm until another sound broke through, the sharp slam of a car door. A silver Mercedes blocked her path. The door opened. Margaret Handy stepped out. She looked almost unchanged, elegant, composed, still wrapped in her armor of pride. But her eyes were different now, dimmer, tired, nearly lost. Michelle tilted her head slightly, voice calm. "I don't think we have any reason to see each other again, Mrs. Handy." Margaret gave a faint, brittle smile. "I'm still Todd's mother, and you're the one who destroyed my family." Michelle met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Your family destroyed itself, Margaret. I just stopped pretending it hadn't." Margaret stepped closer, voice sharp as glass. "You think you're so righteous? You walked away and made us the city's gossip." "No," Michelle interrupted softly. "You did that yourself with the way you treated people." Margaret froze. For a moment, only the sound of rain filled the air, falling on their umbrellas, mingling with her ragged breath. "I came here to offer you something, Michelle," she said, her tone low, trembling. Michelle raised an eyebrow. "An offer?" "Yes. The media storm is ruining Handy Corp. Victoria's wedding is weeks away. We can't have another scandal. If you return, just for a while, things will settle. I'll make sure you have the position you deserve." Michelle went silent for a moment. Then she smiled, not bitterly, not mockingly, just with quiet sorrow. "A position I deserve? You talk as if I ever had one in your house." Margaret's jaw tightened. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here for the sake of dignity." Michelle took a step forward, stopping inches from her. Her voice was low but unwavering. "Dignity? You want to talk to me about dignity after all the lies you built to hide the truth?" Margaret faltered, taking a half step back. Michelle's eyes glimmered beneath the rain. "I found the box, Margaret." Margaret's face went still. "You?" "Yes," Michelle said, each word deliberate. I know my money saved Handy Corporation all those years ago. I know you wrote me a letter of gratitude and then pretended it never existed." Margaret's complexion turned pale. "You don't understand. Back then No, I understand perfectly," Michelle said quietly. "You were afraid that a woman like me would outshine your son. So you chose to silence me, to turn me into the servant in my home." Margaret's breath quickened. "I did what I had to do to protect my family." Michelle's voice was calm, cutting through the rain. "And in protecting your name, you lost something greater, your humanity." A gust of wind swept through, tugging at Margaret's coat. A droplet slid down her cheek, rain, or maybe a tear. Michelle's tone softened. "You once told me a woman must stay silent to earn respect. Now I know silence doesn't bring respect. It only teaches people to forget that you're human too." Margaret's hands trembled. She wanted to answer, but no words came. For the first time, her eyes held no fury, only emptiness. Then came the sound of another car door. A young woman ran up through the rain. "Victoria." "Mom, I told you not to come here." Margaret turned, her voice weary. "You don't understand, Victoria." Victoria stepped forward, glancing at Michelle with guilt and admiration. "I'm sorry, Michelle. I know everything now. I found the box you left behind." Margaret spun around. "What?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I read your letter inside it, Mother. The one where you thanked her. Have you forgotten?" Margaret's face drained of color. Michelle said nothing. Nothing was left to say. The truth had spoken through her daughter. A single tear slid from Margaret's eye, disappearing into the rain. She turned away, her steps slow, shoulders trembling. Michelle watched her go and spoke softly. "I don't hate you, Margaret. I pity you because even now, you can't see that the power you cling to is worth nothing without compassion." Margaret didn't look back. The Mercedes rolled away, leaving a long streak of water behind. Victoria stayed, eyes red. "I don't know what to say." Michelle smiled gently. "You don't have to. Just live differently." She rested a hand on Victoria's shoulder, squeezing lightly. "Protect the love you have, but never at the cost of truth." Victoria nodded, tears slipping down her face. The two women stood in the rain, no music, no witnesses, only the stillness that follows truth finally being set free. That night, Michelle returned to her midtown apartment. Her coat was still damp, but her heart was quiet. She brewed tea and sat by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. On the table, her phone lit up a message from an unknown number. "I owe you a thank you, M." Michelle looked at it, smiled faintly, and set the phone down. Sometimes silence is the most graceful reply. She opened her laptop and reviewed the plans for the second light. Numbers, charts, the names of community centers, all pulsed with life. She was no longer the woman defined by pain. She was the woman rebuilding, one stone at a time. Outside, the rain eased. Diana Ross's voice soared from the radio, "Ain't no mountain high enough." Michelle smiled, tapping her fingers in rhythm. "No wind, no rain can stop me, baby." She stood, opened the window, letting the night air sweep in. The chill brushed her face, but it felt clean, almost new. Across the river, Manhattan shimmered like a galaxy. In the reflection on the glass, she saw herself an ordinary woman with light in her eyes. And somewhere, in a cold mansion on the Upper East Side, Margaret Handy sat alone beside the open wooden box, letters scattered across the table. The golden lamplight touched her face, no longer the mask of power, but the weary face of a mother who had lost her daughter's faith. She wept quietly. No one saw. And miles away, Michelle, sensing something shift in the air, whispered to herself, "In the end, the truth always finds its way." Outside, the wind rose, carrying the scent of rain and chamomile tea through the small apartment. Michelle closed her eyes and let peace settle in. In her dream, she walked across a long bridge toward a soft, warm light, the second light of freedom. The first morning, Michelle woke in her new Manhattan hotel room. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, soft as a promise. The hum of cars rose from the street below. The city pulsed with urgency, and Michelle felt that rhythm truly belonged to her for the first time in years. No more handy mansion steeped in the scent of old power. No more silent footsteps of servants behind closed doors. No more long, suffocating dinners. Just her, a cup of hot coffee, and the clear sky outside the glass. Her phone buzzed non-stop on the table, over 30 messages from reporters, magazines, old friends, and people who once owed her a thank you. Michelle ignored them all. She opened her laptop and logged into an old account, one she hadn't touched since before her marriage, when she was simply Michelle Anna, founder of the non-profit Brighter Steps Foundation. The page still loaded perfectly, frozen in time. Across the top of the website, her old motto appeared: "When you help a child read a single page, you give an entire world another dream." That line had once been her heartbeat, before love and Todd made her forget it. Michelle smiled, inhaling deeply. "Let's begin again," she whispered, and began making calls. The first was to Dr. Demi Moore, her mentor, friend, and partner from the early days of community projects. The conversation lasted barely 10 minutes, but by the time it ended, Michelle had a meeting set with the City Children's Hospital Board. They were seeking a respected figure to lead an educational fund worth millions. Stepping out of the hotel, Michelle moved through the rain-slicked streets with a confidence that startled even herself. Amid the towering skyline, the woman once dismissed as staff now walked like someone who had rediscovered her power. 3 days later, she appeared at a charity gala, not as anyone's wife, but as the keynote speaker. When the spotlight fell, the room quieted. Her voice was steady, low, and resonant. "I used to think a woman's strength was measured by how much she could endure, but I've learned that sometimes true strength is the courage to say, 'Enough.'" At the back of the hall, those who had once mocked her sat silent, and the next morning, the city's headlines told her story. The woman once cast aside returns, and New York listens. Meanwhile, the Handy mansion had begun to crumble from within. Margaret sat in her study, sleepless eyes ringed with grey, her tea long gone cold. From morning to noon, the phone rang relentlessly, cancelled invitations, withdrawn projects, former allies now avoiding her calls. One newspaper ran a scathing editorial. "Some families believe they were born to lead until the truth reminds them they only survived by someone else's grace." She knew exactly who they meant: the daughter-in-law she had humiliated. Todd, meanwhile, had fallen into chaos. He drank, he shouted, he fell silent for hours. Every time he looked at his bare hand where his ring used to be, his chest tightened. But what haunted him wasn't losing Michelle. It was hearing her name spoken with respect. At every party now, no one asks, "Where's Todd Handy?" They asked, "What is Michelle Anna doing next?" One night, Margaret summoned him to the living room. "We have to act. We need to bring her back before she eradicates us." Todd laughed bitterly, eyes hollow. "You still don't get it, do you? She doesn't need us anymore. Don't be foolish. No one survives alone in this world." Todd turned to the window, voice rough. "Maybe you should look around, Mother, and ask who can't survive without her." Outside, the press couldn't stop praising Michelle. She had become the face of a new kind of woman, strong, intelligent, unafraid to walk away and rebuild. A TV network invited her for a live interview. When asked about her fall from grace, she smiled and said, "Falling didn't make me weaker. It reminded me that the ground I thought was hell was just the start." The line went viral overnight. Soon after, Michelle was named honorary chairwoman of the City Children's Fund. At the launch gala, a quiet guest stood at the back of the room, James Wellington, Victoria's fiancé. He watched her speak, realizing that this woman hadn't just returned. She was rewriting the rules of high society itself. When the event ended, James approached, handing her a business card. His voice was low, careful. "You may not know this, but the truth you left behind that box, it's about to be found." Michelle looked at him, a soft, knowing smile touching her lips. She said nothing, only met his eyes with calm assurance. Inside, she already knew. The real game had only just begun. That afternoon, a light rain fell over Manhattan. It wasn't heavy, just enough to blur the yellow glow spilling from the windows of the Handy mansion. In Michelle's old room, the faint scent of jasmine still lingered, the perfume she used to wear each night before bed. Victoria Handy stood in the middle of that room, motionless before a small wooden box hidden beneath layers of silk. She'd found it by accident while packing away her sister-in-law's things. It was a dark oak box, initials M.A.H. carved into the lid, Michelle Anna Handy. But when she opened it, what stopped her wasn't memory. It was true. Inside lay a stack of financial records, letters of gratitude, and faded photographs. Her mother wrote one letter, Margaret Handy, the handwriting unmistakable. "Michelle, our company would no longer exist if not for you. I promise I will never forget this debt." Beneath the letter were bank receipts, hundreds of thousands of dollars wired from Michelle's private account into Handy Corporation's rescue funds, all on the same date, the day Todd Handy lost everything in his first investment gamble. Victoria sank into a chair. Her hands trembled so violently that she could barely hold the paper. Every rumor, every whisper, every cruel glance her mother had cast upon Michelle over the years shattered like glass. The woman they had called the house staff was the one who had saved them from ruin. She kept reading. Letters from her late father, the man once considered the model of respectability, pleading with Michelle to cover Margaret's debts. An envelope held an old magazine clipping. Michelle Anna, the woman who rebuilt New York's forgotten neighborhoods. She had been a symbol of compassion long before becoming a Handy. A gust of wind blew through the window, scattering papers across the floor. The sound of rustling sheets echoed like accusations. Victoria knelt to pick them up, tears slipping free. "Oh God, Michelle," she whispered. "What did we do to you?" The door swung open. Margaret appeared dressed in grey silk, face like carved stone. "What are you doing in here?" Victoria turned, eyes red. "I'm looking for your conscience, Mother." Margaret's expression hardened. "Give that to me." "This?" Victoria lifted the wooden box, her hand still shaking. "The box you swore didn't exist?" "It means nothing. Those papers are from another time." Victoria gave a bitter laugh. "Another time? You wrote you'd never forget, and yet you forgot in one night, the night you humiliated her." Margaret's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. Michelle did this for power. She wanted leverage, wanted us in her debt." "No, Mother." Victoria's voice trembled, but her words were clear. "She did it because she has a heart, something this family has long since lost." Silence filled the room. Rain pattered softly against the window pane. Margaret stepped back, pale, stunned by her daughter's defiance. Victoria drew a deep breath. I'm going to the Wellingtons. They deserve to know who they're marrying into. Margaret nearly shouted, You will not. You'll destroy your future. If I must choose between reputation and integrity, Victoria said evenly, I choose integrity. She walked out, the wooden box in her arms carrying the truth the Handy family had buried for years. That night, in the Wellington family library, golden light glowed across the tall ceilings and painted portraits. The air was tight, charged. Victoria sat beside James, facing his parents Charles and Patricia Wellington. The wooden box lay open before them, papers neatly arranged. Charles turned each page slowly, his stern face shifting into quiet gravity. Patricia's brows drew together as she read the handwritten letters. For several long minutes, no one spoke. Only the rhythmic clock ticking filled the silence, counting down the seconds before the truth landed. Finally, Charles looked up. I want to be certain. This signature, it's your mother's. Victoria nodded. Yes, sir, and my father's as well. These are official bank transfers. Patricia reached across the table, touching Victoria's hand gently. You did the right thing, my dear. Moments later, the library doors opened. Margaret and Todd entered, followed by a nervous butler. They had been summoned to clarify a few matters. Margaret's posture remained regal, but her eyes betrayed unease. Charles Wellington wasted no time. Mrs. Handy, do you recognize these letters? Margaret hesitated, then forced a thin smile. Ah, yes. I may have written a few notes of gratitude. Michelle helped us once, in some small matters. Small matters? Charles interrupted, his tone like a blade. She saved your company from collapse with her own money. The room grew heavy, the air dense enough to feel. Todd stared at the floor, fists clenched. Margaret fought to keep her composure. Mr. Wellington, that was long ago. I don't see why this needs to be reopened. Patricia spoke then, her voice calm but cold. Because your past directly concerns my son and your daughter's future. We will not bind our family to people who mistake kindness for weakness or humility for servitude. Todd lifted his head, his voice cracking. I know I failed her, but I love her. I'll find Michelle, apologize, and bring her home. Charles met his eyes, steady and unflinching. You have no right to bring anyone home, Todd. The woman you once called Staff is now one of this city's most respected names. If she ever returns, it will be for herself, not for you. Margaret shot to her feet. You have no right to insult my family. Charles replied quietly, each word deliberate. This isn't an insult, Mrs. Handy. It's a consequence. The words echoed against the marble walls, reverberating like judgment. Victoria's voice trembled as she gripped James's hand. I can't go through with this marriage while the truth stays buried. Unless there's a public apology to Michelle, there will be no wedding. Patricia nodded firmly. Charles added, and Mrs. Handy, if you have even a shred of conscience left, remember this. The woman you disgraced is why your name still exists in New York. Margaret said nothing. She stared at the table, the open box, and the proof of everything she'd denied. Outside, the rain fell steadily, mingling with the ticking clock, counting down the final hours of a dynasty that once mistook pride for strength. Michelle Anna stood by the window across the city, in her hotel room, watching the rain blur the lights of Manhattan. She felt something stir deep within her chest, a quiet knowing, a pulse. Somewhere, the box had been opened. The truth was finally speaking for her. She closed her eyes and whispered, now they'll see. You can't hide the light forever. That morning, New York was draped in a thin veil of fog that made everything shimmer pale and cold. Inside the Wellington mansion, the conference room looked more like a courtroom. There was no judge, yet justice lingered in the air. No defendant, yet guilt sat heavy in the center of the room, breathing through every silence. Charles Wellington sat behind an old walnut table, fingers interlocked. His eyes were fixed on the people before him, Margaret, Todd, and Victoria Handy. Behind them, James stood near the wall, tension drawn across his face. No one spoke. No one dared to be the first to shatter the silence that held the weight of truth. At last, Charles broke it, his voice deep and resonant, like a bronze bell. I'd like to believe there's still enough trust between our families for an honest conversation. But if what I've read in that box is true, then the Handy legacy is nothing more than a facade. Margaret Handy clasped her hands tightly, forcing a brittle smile. Mr. Wellington, please, don't let a few papers mislead you. Michelle has always known how to play a role. She thrives on turning things into sentimental tales. Charles placed the file on the table, his gaze cutting like steel. Those few papers bear your signature, your husband's, your son's. Do you call that fiction? The air in the room thickened. Todd's face went pale as he turned toward his mother. Margaret struggled to steady her voice. Michelle helped us, yes. But let's not pretend she didn't benefit too. Patricia Wellington, calm and composed until now, finally spoke, her tone sharp and deliberate. Mrs. Handy, I've lived long enough to recognize those who give freely and those who take without gratitude. Michelle never needed fame. She already had it before she entered your home. It was you who clung to her light to hide your own weakness. The words landed like stones. Margaret's throat tightened. She turned to her daughter, searching for an ally. Victoria, are you going to stay silent while outsiders humiliate your mother? Victoria raised her head, eyes bright with a new kind of conviction. Mother, I've been silent all my life to protect a name I now feel ashamed to carry. Michelle isn't the one who disgraced us. We did that ourselves. Margaret shot to her feet, hands trembling. You don't understand. This family survived because I was strong and protected our honor. No, Mother. Victoria's voice was low but steady, slicing through the room like the final thread of a long frayed tie. This family survived because of a woman you called the Help. Todd buried his face in his hands. The room fell into a suffocating stillness. Outside, the rain began again, soft but relentless, like the ticking countdown of a crumbling empire. By that afternoon, a letter had left the Wellington estate and been addressed to the New York Tribune. It was brief, only a few lines, but enough to shake the upper crust of the city. The Wellington family hereby announces the postponement of the engagement between James Wellington and Victoria Handy, pending the restoration of honesty and justice. We believe integrity must come before alliance. When the news broke, Manhattan erupted. Parties, phone calls, whispers all around one name, Michelle Anna. The woman once dismissed as a servant had become a symbol of dignity and freedom. Meanwhile, the Handy mansion sank into shadow. Margaret barely left her room. Todd wandered the halls, haunted by ghosts of his own making. Victoria sat at her father's old desk, writing a letter with trembling hands. Dear Michelle, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I must say everything I believed about you, about us, was wrong. I'm sorry. From the deepest part of me, I want to rebuild what our family destroyed. And if you allow it, I will tell the public and the world the truth. She folded the letter and sent it through a journalist friend. Days later, Michelle Anna stood again under the lights, not as a symbol, but as living proof of what resilience looked like. It was a press conference for her charity foundation, yet every reporter wanted something else. A statement about the Handy family. Halfway through, a voice called from the crowd, Miss Anna, do you have anything to say to the Handy family? Michelle paused. Her eyes, calm and deep, seemed to look through time itself. Then she smiled faintly. I hope they understand that some debts can't be paid with money, only with change. And if today they've learned to face themselves, then forgiveness has already begun. At the back of the hall, Victoria stood silently, tears streaking her cheeks. Michelle saw her and nodded once. No words were needed. Forgiveness had already begun in that quiet exchange. Elsewhere, in a dimly lit room, Margaret Handy wrote a letter for the first time, not for reputation, but repentance. Her handwriting trembled. You were right, and I was wrong. If there's another life, I hope to be your student, not your judge. The letter was never sent, but within her, it was a confession long overdue. Above New York, the rain had stopped. The city glowed again beneath its endless skyline. And somewhere in that vast expanse, people told the story of a woman once called the Help, now the light that exposed the shadows of two great families. In that light, every last lie began to dissolve. That autumn afternoon, sunlight spilled gently through the golden leaves in the Wellington gardens. White ribbons fluttered in the breeze, and the soft strains of a violin drifted across the air, music not for celebration, but for healing. This was no longer the grand engagement party that society once anticipated. It was a gathering of truth, of apology, of forgiveness. Guests arrived quietly. No gossip, no laughter too loud. Everyone knew this was a different evening where confessions, not champagne, would sparkle. Michelle Anna stepped out of a silver car, her dress a deep shade of jade, the color of rebirth. Sunlight glimmered in her hair, and the garden seemed still momentarily. She strolled, steadily, each step a quiet declaration of survival. Gone was the woman humiliated under chandeliers. Here stood the woman who had risen from it. Inside, Victoria waited beside James, her hand trembling slightly, her gaze calm. When she saw Michelle approach, her voice broke into a whisper. "You came." Michelle smiled gently. "I promised I would, and a promise, even if forgotten, is still a promise." The garden fell silent as Charles Wellington stepped onto the small platform surrounded by candles and flowers. His voice carried clearly, measured, and warm. "Today is not about reviving a wedding. It is about remembering how to be human. Miss Michelle Anna, once wronged in her own home, has come here, not to be applauded, but to teach us what forgiveness truly looks like." His gaze turned toward the front row, where Margaret Handy sat, the once proud matriarch, now cloaked in quiet humility. Her makeup was gone. Only weary eyes and a trembling sheet of paper remained. When Charles finished, she rose and walked forward, each step unsteady. "I have a few words." Her voice cracked, soft but strong enough to still the garden. "I once believed that honor could be preserved through silence, but my silence was nothing more than cowardice wrapped in silk." Turning to Michelle, her eyes filled with tears. "Michelle, you taught me the lesson I refused to learn. That true strength is not power, it is compassion. I hurt you, and for that, I am sorry." No one moved. No one breathed. Only the soft murmur of wind through the trees. Michelle stepped forward, gently taking Margaret's hand. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Margaret. It's being able to look at the wound and no longer wish to rewind." Margaret broke down, clutching Michelle as if afraid to let go, as if releasing her meant losing her last chance at redemption. As dusk descended, the garden softened into gold. The violin's melody deepened, warm and slow, pulsing like a heartbeat. Victoria took the stage, holding James's hand. Her voice trembled but rang clear. "I once thought love only needed a heart, but Michelle taught me it also needs dignity. I will not be a wife who stands silent behind glass." And today, I thank the woman who taught me that truth. The crowd was still. Then came the applause, gentle at first, then swelling, echoing across the garden. Michelle bowed her head slightly, smiling with quiet grace. She knew this wasn't just gratitude, it was a turning point. A new generation had learned how to love without losing themselves. At the edge of the garden, Todd Handy stood alone. The fading light traced his thinner, wearier face. He walked toward Michelle and stopped a few steps away. "I didn't come to ask for your love back," he said softly. "I just wanted to thank you for once loving me, even when I didn't deserve it." Michelle met his gaze, kind but distant. "Love doesn't die, Todd. It just changes shape from attachment to lesson." He nodded, smiled faintly, and turned away, his figure dissolving into the amber glow of the evening. When night fell, lanterns flickered to life across the garden. Michelle stood beneath them, eyes lifted to the New York sky. Laughter and music drifted in the distance, but there was only calm within her. She whispered to the wind, "I was once called a servant, but from that lowest place, I learned how to stand tall. I don't need to belong to anyone anymore. I only need to belong to myself." She walked down the glowing path, her emerald gown swaying softly in the breeze. No more pain, no more vengeance. Only a woman reborn from her own scars. And across the city, people would still speak her name, Michelle Anna, not as a symbol of disgrace, but as a symbol of rebirth. Some stories don't end in love. The story of Michelle Anna, the woman once diminished, who stood up and made the world bow in quiet respect.